A simple man was punished for fishing in a pond, but everything changed when he bought the pond. If this story touched you too, and you felt that justice isn't just about rules, but also about the courage that comes from the heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video. Because sometimes, the quietest struggles bring about the biggest changes. Let me know if you'd like to make any adjustments. Lucas Brandt had come from a success story that most people only dream about. Thanks to his investments, he retired young, selling his shares in major tech companies and securing the chance to spend the rest of his life in peace. But neither his wealth nor his success could bring his wife back. When he lost his wife Rachel to cancer last year, his world crumbled. All he had left was his 14-year-old daughter Mila. He would do anything to see her smile again, even just for a moment. That's why they had moved. Lucas was looking for a fresh start, a quiet, orderly, and secure place. A neighborhood close to nature. Lakeside Estates seemed to tick all the boxes. Modern homes by the pond, quality schools, clean streets. And in the middle, a peaceful 6-acre pond. The real estate agent had told him that the pond was open for community use, and fishing and spending time in nature were some of the biggest perks of the area. 2 months after moving in, Lucas was fishing with Mila on the small wooden dock by the pond one Saturday morning. Mila had a real smile on her face, the kind Lucas hadn't seen in a long time. At that moment, everything felt worth it. Just as Mila was catching her second bluefin fish, a voice suddenly broke the peaceful silence. "Excuse me, but what do you think you're doing?" Lucas looked up and saw a woman, impeccably dressed, with bright blonde highlights and a tablet in her hand. She looked more like she had walked into a luxury sports club, not a quiet pond. Her expression was one of anger, as if they'd been caught in the middle of vandalism. "Good morning," Lucas said calmly. "My daughter and I were just fishing. I'm Lucas Brandt. We moved to Sycamore Street 2 months ago." Without even offering a handshake, the woman pressed something on her tablet. "Mr. Brandt, fishing in our pond is absolutely prohibited. This is a direct violation of the condo association rules. I'm Claudia Berger, the president of the community. I'm issuing a $500 fine." Mila's smile instantly disappeared. Her eyes began to tear up. Lucas remembered the real estate agent saying fishing was allowed. But Claudia, with a small smile, showed him her tablet. It read, "Recreation Rules Addendum, approved 4 weeks ago." It was emailed to all residents. Claudia said coldly, "If you didn't read it, that's your responsibility. Maybe you should check your spam folder." Lucas gritted his teeth but didn't raise his voice. Why was fishing suddenly banned? Anyone can see there are fish in the pond. Are we causing any harm? Claudia looked down at her equipment dismissively. Environmental and safety reasons. Hooks could hurt animals, and the smell of bait disturbs neighbors who are trying to enjoy the pond view. It wasn't about rules for this woman. It was about asserting her dominance. Lucas looked at Mila. Her small shoulders were shaking. His anger was bubbling up inside, but he forced a sad expression onto his face. "Let's go," he said in a low voice, wrapping his arm around Mila's shoulder. "Please email me the fine details and the full version of the rules." Claudia smiled, as if she had won. "Nice meeting you, Mr. Brandt. I hope we won't have any more misunderstandings." As they walked away, Claudia disappeared almost silently across the grass. Mila was biting her lip to keep from crying. "Dad, why was that woman so mean? We didn't do anything wrong." Lucas hugged his daughter. "Some people love rules more than they love people, sweetie." That evening, Lucas went through his emails and spam folder thoroughly. But there was no notification about the ban Claudia mentioned. In that moment, he made up his mind. This wasn't going to end here. Claudia Berger's dismissive look that morning wouldn't leave Lucas's mind. But more importantly, it was the hurt in Mila's eyes. This neighborhood had been their hope for healing. Now, it had turned into an embarrassment piled on top of the pain. That's exactly why Lucas decided to take action. He was a man who had spent years in the investment world. He analyzed companies, pinpointed weaknesses, and turned the system to his advantage. Now, the company he was up against was a small neighborhood association. But even the most dangerous competitors, if they rise on weak ground, are bound to fall. First, Lucas researched Claudia Berger. A few hours of online digging gave him some striking results. Claudia owned a small but effective real estate agency focused on luxury properties. She had been the president of Lakeside Estates for years, and almost no one had ever replaced her. What was even more interesting was the photos on her social media accounts, pictures of lavish, alcohol-soaked parties by the pond. Yet fishing, supposedly banned for environmental and peace reasons, had somehow never been mentioned. Was alcohol really quieter than the sound of a father and daughter fishing peacefully? But the real bombshell came in the community's official regulations. The pond wasn't directly owned by the community. Lucas found a small note in the documents indicating it was owned by Meridian Development Incorporated. This company was the original creator of the development and still appeared to be the pond's owner. The community only had the right to use it through a 30-year contract. And that contract was set to expire in just 2 months. This information immediately got Lucas moving. The next morning, an elderly neighbor walking his dog caught his attention. He introduced himself. "I'm Henry Weiss, retired lawyer. I live 3 houses down." When Lucas explained the situation with Claudia, Henry's face darkened. "Ah, you've met Claudia," he said with a wry smile. "Everyone I talk to has a similar story." Henry invited Lucas for coffee, and Lucas accepted without hesitation. The old man's office was filled with law books. The coffee, surprisingly, was delicious. "I'll show you something," Henry said. He pulled out an old file, filled with documents, photocopies, and years of notes. The pond still legally belongs to Meridian. The community association is just renting it. And the lease contract ends in 2 months. Lucas listened in shock. This information wasn't just strategic, it was a game changer. But why did they ban fishing? Was it just for show? Lucas asked. "No. Claudia wants to buy the pond," Henry answered. "But for herself, not for the HOA. Through her own company. She plans to build luxury pondside homes. She's already started talking to contractors." At that moment, everything clicked in Lucas's mind. The fishing ban was the first step in slowly restricting public access to the pond. Once people couldn't use the pond, it would turn into a private area that would increase in value for investment purposes. The next evening, Henry introduced Lucas to someone else, David Keller. A former bank manager, David had information about Claudia's financial background. More importantly, David had been tracking the practices of the HOA for the past 10 years in a database. "It started as just personal notes," David said, showing Lucas Excel spreadsheets on his computer. "But over time, I noticed who Claudia was finding and which neighborhoods were being targeted more often. The data was shocking. Black or immigrant families were fined 3 times more than white neighbors. And these fines had caused many of them to sell their homes at a loss. Most of these homes had then been purchased by companies owned by Claudia under different names: Wellington Investments, Sierra Vista Properties, Berger Holdings, all serving the same purpose. So here's the game," David said. "Fines, scare them off, buy low, sell high. And now she wants the pond. We have to stop her." Lucas now realized he wasn't just fighting for his own honor or for Mila. He was fighting for the whole neighborhood. This wasn't just a lawsuit, it was a revolution. But first, he needed to speak to the true owner of the pond. Lucas Brandt had managed countless complex negotiations throughout his life, but now he was facing a different kind of opponent. On the surface, she was just a regular neighborhood manager, but behind the scenes, Claudia Berger controlled an entire system all by herself. In meetings with David and Henry, Lucas had begun to understand the disorganized but cleverly hidden real estate network Claudia had built. Everyone believed she was a successful businesswoman. But the documents Lucas analyzed painted a different picture. Claudia was heavily in debt. Many of the properties she claimed to own were actually being propped up by bank loans. Moreover, she hadn't even gathered the $300,000 she needed to buy the pond. This was her weak spot, and Lucas was going to attack from there. David introduced Lucas to another key figure, Daniel Meyer, an experienced real estate agent who knew the local market inside and out. Lucas met Daniel in a quiet cafe, 20 minutes outside the city center. "Claudia is currently in private talks with Meridian Development Incorporated, the owner of the pond," Daniel said quietly. "But Meridian is in trouble. Several of their major projects were canceled during the last pandemic. They're in urgent need of cash. So, if another offer comes in, could Claudia's deal be canceled?" Lucas asked. Daniel nodded. "Absolutely. If a high cash offer comes in, they could cancel her right away." Hearing this, Lucas's plan was no longer just an idea. It was a strategy he had executed countless times before in his investment career. A clever, legal buyout move to flip the game in his favor. He set up a new company called Thorncroft Holdings LLC, using no personal connections and leaving no traces. This company was created solely for this operation. With a $350,000 cash offer, the contract documents reached Meridian within 3 days. The company's board immediately accepted Lucas's offer, which was far more appealing than Claudia's complex, installment-based one. Now, Lucas Brandt was the true owner of the pond. But no one knew that yet. Claudia still thought she had won. She was so convinced she'd owned the pond that she had arranged a special presentation with an architecture firm and had put up posters in the community announcing, taking Lakeside Estates to the next level. She planned to reduce the pond size by 20% and build a members-only pond lounge in its place. Her plans were grand, but the ground was already rotten underneath her because the pond no longer belonged to her. Meanwhile, Lucas remained silent, continuing to set the stage. Claudia's recent fundraising efforts, her proposed fee hikes, and her new projects had started attracting more attention from neighbors. But no one knew the pond had already been sold. Claudia began to suspect Lucas's activities. Suddenly, Lucas started receiving a fine every week. The garage door wasn't the right color. The grass along the sidewalk was 3 centimeters too long. The mailbox's height was out of standard. Mila's bike was parked in the wrong spot for 12 minutes. But along with these fines, Claudia unknowingly began to lose the support of the community. Because soon, other neighbors who had interacted with Lucas started receiving the same fines. Isabel Roth, a nurse and mother of 3, was kicked out of the pool because her children were too noisy. Thomas Koenig, who used the same Christmas decorations every year, was fined for light intensity on his holiday lights. Nina Lorenz, who only voiced an opinion at a meeting, was humiliated, and soon issues started appearing with her flower shop's lease agreement. This systematic pressure created a fracture in the neighborhood. Now, it wasn't just a few people, it was many of the neighbors who started supporting Lucas. And then the evening finally arrived. As Claudia prepared for a big presentation on the future of the pond, Lucas completed the final step of his plan. He had the old usage agreement for the pond canceled early due to environmental violations. The long-standing lack of maintenance, chemical imbalances, and the damage to fish species had given him the legal grounds. The day of Claudia's victory speech came. The pond was decorated, a sound system was set up, and wine was ready to be served. Only the old residents had been invited. New arrivals, or anyone Claudia didn't like, hadn't been given any information. But Lucas arrived with documents in hand. He had Henry, David, his own lawyer, and a police officer from the local authority with him. He took the microphone and began speaking calmly. Beautiful day, isn't it? Not just for enjoying the pond, but also for revealing a truth. Claudia froze. The legal owner of the pond is now me. Yes, this area is now registered under Thorncroft Holdings LLC. And from this moment on, gathering here without permission will be considered trespassing on private property. The crowd went silent all at once. Additionally, the pond's usage agreement has been canceled due to environmental violations. From today on, this pond and its surroundings are private property. Please collect your belongings and leave the area within 15 minutes. As the police officer nodded slowly from behind, Claudia was in shock. This is impossible. You can't do this. You were the one who loved the rules, Claudia, Lucas said quietly. I'm just playing by the rules you wrote. The silence that followed Lucas's announcement of being the new owner of the pond quickly turned into a hum of confusion. People were stunned. Claudia Berger's reign, which she had maintained for years, had suddenly been shaken. No one had expected the ground to be pulled out from under her. But that's exactly what happened. Claudia's face turned ashen. She made a move to grab the microphone, but Lucas raised his hand to stop her. I may not have been invited to this meeting, Lucas said calmly. But as the owner of this property, I no longer need permission to be here. He then showed the documents, the deed to the pond, the paperwork for canceling the usage agreement, and the official letter from the police officer. Everything was legal, complete, and powerful enough to shatter all of Claudia's plans. The meeting quickly dispersed. Some people glared at Claudia in anger, while others silently approached Lucas and shook his hand. I've been waiting for someone to finally stand up to this woman, said an elderly man with gray hair. She's made fun of us and our kids for years, said a young mother. Thank you for showing up. But Claudia didn't think this would end here. The very next day, Lucas received 3 different inspection orders for his home from the city hall. First, they claimed the roof had been illegally renovated. Then, the garage door didn't comply with the city's aesthetic guidelines. Lastly, the trees in front of his house were damaging the city's ecology, they said. Lucas patiently resisted all these attacks. He wasn't going to stoop to Claudia's level. Instead, he was guiding her through the labyrinth she had created. But one morning, when Mila came home from school with tearful eyes, Lucas was reaching his breaking point. "Dad," she sobbed, "everyone at school is calling us the pond thieves. Claudia's daughter Brianna says her mom's going to get us kicked out of the neighborhood." The moment Claudia started targeting Mila, everything changed. That night, Lucas sat down with David and Henry and decided it was time to move to the final phase of his plan. Rachel's pond. Yes, now that pond was going to belong to Rachel, not Claudia. Not physically, perhaps, but spiritually. Lucas was going to name the pond after the most precious person in his life and turn her memory into an act of kindness. The first step was a special meeting for the whole neighborhood, excluding Claudia. About 60 households showed up, some out of curiosity, some with hope. But everyone felt that something was about to change. Lucas began his speech by talking about Mila. He shared the day they first went fishing together, how he had fallen into an emotional void after losing his wife, and what the pond meant to them. Then he showed the documents in his hand. This pond will now be legally protected through a community trust, and with 3 conditions. The HOA management would be completely restructured. Elections would be transparent, and terms would be limited. All regulations would be reviewed. Equal, fair, and non-discriminatory rules would be implemented. An independent ethics commission would be established. The members would rotate regularly and oversee decisions. The atmosphere in the room was tense, but there was a noticeable wave of respect forming. People were finally facing a leader who listened to them, who seemed to understand them. Then, Lucas made the bombshell announcement. "There's one more detail. Over the past month, I've purchased the mortgage documents from several banks in the area." A hum rose in the room. Lucas continued, "Among those mortgages is Claudia Berger's house, and also the homes of her 2 closest supporters." The crowd was shocked. "But don't worry, I'm not going to evict anyone. On the contrary, I'm offering interest-free refinancing options. The only condition is that we fix this system together." The applause that followed was like the bursting of years of silence. Just 3 days later, Claudia Berger resigned. Her plans for the pond were dashed, and her reign of pressure came to an end. 2 other board members left with her. They were replaced by people who had remained silent for years but had strong consciences. The new president, Nina Lorenz. The name of the pond was officially changed, Rachel's Pond. A simple sign was placed at its edge. It read, "This pond is a place where love and justice reflect, open to all, belonging to every heart." And even better, Lucas launched a fishing and nature education program for all the children. There was just one condition. Children of families still serving on the board couldn't participate. Not until their parents stepped down from their positions. For Claudia Berger, everything seemed to have turned into a nightmare. She used to walk proudly through the streets of Lakeside Estates, but now she walked with her eyes down, avoiding contact. She had lost control over the pond, was forced to resign as the HOA president, and now she was at the center of investigations. But Lucas Brandt's fight wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. And that difference had begun to shake the neighborhood to its core and rebuild it from the ground up. Claudia's final move revealed her true character. One night, Lucas's security cameras caught Claudia with 2 former board members by the pond. They were holding small bottles, and it was clear that the woman was dumping something into the water. By morning, Lucas had sent the footage to the police without wasting any time. Contaminating the pond with harmful substances, especially when it was now a private property, was a serious crime. Claudia was arrested on charges of trespassing and environmental sabotage. But the situation didn't end there. As the investigation deepened, documents emerged showing that Claudia had engaged in systematic discrimination over the years, redirected public resources for personal gain, and manipulated real estate deals through fake companies. Some of the former board members confirmed Claudia's instructions with documented evidence. The support network that had once surrounded her now turned against her, and she found herself facing the very system she had created. Meanwhile, things in the neighborhood took an entirely different turn. Rachel's Pond had truly become a community hub. Lucas's environmental and fishing programs for children were hugely popular. Mila had become one of the coordinators of the project. She was no longer just her father's daughter. She was a small leader of the pond, carrying her mother's name. This pond had become a source of hope for others, and that made her proud. One Saturday, nearly the entire neighborhood turned out for the community fishing day at the pond. Children excitedly cast their lines into the water, while parents sat on benches by the pond, chatting. The walls of prejudice that had once divided them were now crumbling with laughter. At the end of the event, Lucas took the microphone. This time, he wouldn't make an official statement. It was going to be a heartfelt speech. A year ago, my daughter and I were fishing here, and we had an encounter that changed our lives. That day, what was being taken from us wasn't just a fishing rod and a few fish. It was our peace, our respect, our memories. But as you can see, we didn't lose. On the contrary, we grew. And together, we rebuilt. The crowd responded with applause. Mila came up to her father and took his hand. Lucas smiled. If we're here today, it's not just my victory. It's all of ours. This pond is now filled not only with water, but with friendship. And I believe Rachel is watching from somewhere, smiling. At that moment, Mila rested her head on her father's shoulder. There were no tears in her eyes anymore. Only peace. Months passed. Claudia Berger was found guilty as a result of the lawsuits. Along with the penalties she received, her biggest loss was the collapse of the fake empire she had built. She had lost both her career and her reputation. She put her house up for sale, but no offers came in. The residents of Lakeside Estates were no longer listening to the ghosts of the past. They were listening to the voice of the future. Despite the offers from the local government, Lucas never entered politics. Instead, he used the scholarship fund he created in Rachel's name to provide educational support for children who had lost their parents. Every week, a children's event is held by the pond, sometimes a community cleanup, sometimes nature observation, sometimes simply quiet fishing hours. And on the small sign by the pond, these words are written: everything that is nurtured with love will one day beautify the world. If this story has touched you too, and you feel that justice is sometimes achieved not just through rules, but through patience and solidarity, don't forget to share this story, because maybe one day, by another pond, another Mila might smile again.